Hello, this is Fat Puppy here. This marker right here, and those that go down this row, and then some over there, I think figure into an interesting story. But definitely this man here. Now, here's where we have to be careful of something like this. The words I'm going to read to you may offend you by how they're worded, but they were written at a different time. Can't judge the words as much as the intent in this particular case. Some of you may find this heartwarming, and some of you may find this offensive. Part of what I'm going to say about all these graves here, there's 11 of them. I counted 11. According to the reports, this is Mr. Joseph Levan, okay? According to reports, he was buried in a colored graveyard. Keep in mind, this is 1905, okay? Now, this is not the colored graveyard. This is the city graveyard. However, I happen to know that sometimes they will actually move a graveyard. Sometimes churches, so they can build a parking lot. Just really different reasons. I have to wonder if these 11 graves in this one area may have belonged where there was a graveyard, I believe, where the library is now. If so, they've moved a couple times. I don't know when the date was, but there was a black graveyard that's incorporated into the First Baptist Church graveyard. Well, the First Baptist Church graveyard isn't there anymore. It's a parking lot, with the exception of 4 or 5. They're just on the edge of the parking lot. It's kind of weird. Pretty neat, though. I have to wonder if this was part of the graveyard that was moved twice. I don't know. Now let's talk about Mr. Joseph Levan. See, how do I go from here? Let me read his stone, okay? On this part right here, it says, this monument reads as follows, okay? Joseph Levan, the village barber, born 1830, died December 18th, 1905. It also says on this side, this stone is erected by his white friends in tribute to his worth. On this side, right here, it says he was respected. Let me back up. He was faithful as a slave and respected as a freeman. Something I noticed, you can't see it, but there's a symbol right here that is on that tombstone over there. And it's a Christian symbol, but it's a particular symbol. And that just bolsters what I think about, that all these in this little area here came from the same place. Not here, though. They were moved here. Now, let me tell you about Mr. Joseph Levan, but let me get this in a little better position. I was made aware of this story when a member of the Sons of the Confederate Veterans reached out to me and told me about him. So even today, this man is being honored. And what I'm going to do is just read something that I found on Ancestry.com. It's kind of a biography. So I'll just start. Joseph Levan was born a slave in 1830 and was the property, there's a word we don't like to use, of Mr. Anthony White Sr. Now, I've done a video too on some members of the White family. He was trained to be a house servant, and by the time he was grown, he was a first-class cook, a barber, and a handyman generally. When the war broke out, it's talking about the Civil War, and the first company was organized in Sumter to go to Virginia, Joe was hired from his master by Lieutenant J. Diggs Wilder. Wilder recognized his worth to take him out to the field with him. You know, back in that day, the slave was hired, but the slave was not paid. The master was paid. Yeah, I know it's not good, but that was just reality then. Anyway, Lieutenant J. Diggs Wilder, who carried him to Virginia to serve him in the dual capacity of body servant and cook. This company took part in the Battle of Bull Run, and Captain J.S. Richardson was wounded. Joe was then commissioned to wait on Mr. Richardson while he was in the hospital. When Captain Richardson was able to return home, Joe rejoined the company at the front and continued in the service of Lieutenant Wilder for 2 years, serving him and other members of the company with a devotion and zeal that won him their lifelong friendship. By lifelong, what that means is that lifelong friendship, once the war was over, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. After the war, Joe opened a barbershop here in town, downtown, which he conducted continuously until his death in 1905. He had patronaged, he had customers that rivaled shops, and it could not win away from him. As long as Joe the barber was able to work, he was the most popular place of the kind in town. Even though there were others with more modern parlors or more modern methods, they still went to Joe. He never performed, and you know, this is the life of most people. He never performed any single spectacular service, but was simply faithful, courteous, honest, and industrious throughout his life. He asked no favors from any man and was content to earn an honest living at his trade. In manner, he was polite and respectful. And this is out in the newspaper. I read a newspaper article when for his obituary, and that's the exact words out of the paper. Without a trace of servility, and reserved and dignified. His word was better than many a man's white bond. When he died, there was a general regret in the community, and his funeral was attended by hundreds of his white friends. The suggestion made in a local paper, and I seen that article, that a subscription be started for the purpose of erecting a simple monument to mark his grave, met with immediate response, and in a short time, the sufficient funds were in the hands of Mr. J. Diggs Wilder, who was at that time the adjutant of the Camp Dick Anderson United Confederate Veterans, of which Joe was an honorary member, to pay for the monument. No collection was taken up and no effort was made to raise a large sum by soliciting subscriptions. Even though it was suggested, they never acted on it because they didn't need to. Every dollar being sent or carried in person to Mr. Wilder, who was named in the original suggestion as the proper custodian of the fund. At the first meeting of the Camp Dick Anderson subsequent to Joe's death, a committee was appointed to superintend the erection of the monument. The committee discharged the duty promptly, and shortly before the anniversary of his death, the stone was erected on Joe Levant's grave in the Negro Cemetery, which obviously is not this. So a few things I want to make note of. The Town Barber. I mean, that's what's on his tombstone, the Town Barber. He was paid a lot of respect at a time when black folks weren't getting hardly any respect at all. He was well loved and well respected. The gentleman that he was the servant of in the war and him became lifelong friends. Mr. Wilder, not told in this paper, but I was told by someone else, Mr. Wilder gave Joe Levant the place to do his business at downtown. Mr. Wilder owned that building. Now, Mr. Levant had his own place to live, but downtown was where he cut hair, and Mr. Wilder gave him that space to do it free of charge, from what I understand. His name is Joe Levant. Now, it was customary back then to take the name of the slave owner as your own, but Mr. Levant did not do that. Honestly, I don't know where he got the name from, but it's just an interesting afterthought I had. It also said in a newspaper article of his obituary that he was a major supporter of democratic causes. In other words, he wasn't a Republican. Back at a time when Most of the black folks and all the northern folks were Republican. He was not. He was involved in Democrat politics. He loved the people and they loved him. Mr. Joe Levan.
Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe.
And when you subscribe, there'll be a bell that'll show up on the right-hand side of the screen. Hit that and you'll get notified every time I upload a video. Thank you.